The chap there was around there.
William Hall from Grey College. I don't for a moment deny that there was oppression throughout the age of women, even up to a few decades ago, and even now to an extent. But the debate here tonight is this House Police feminism has lost its way. Now, in the developed world, the Western world, the United Kingdom, Europe, America, there is fantastic sexual equality. You may argue in some sense from that, and I will listen to them. However, why can you say that feminism has not lost its way when it seems that in the world today here, men are attacked for every tiny grievance that there is, while in the developing world, in sub-Saharan Africa, there are fertility rates of 7.5, there is FGM. There seems to be, in the Western world, no movement to end that sort of oppression of women. That, to me, feminism has lost its way because it seems to be ignoring women in developing countries. They seem to be forgotten to try and further the plight of women in the Western world. I mean, that's my point, is how can you say it hasn't lost its way when they have forgotten the women there?
Sammy Martin from Durham College. So I'd like to ask the opposition about the idea of patriarchy, because it seems like there's two interpretations of it. So you talk about there being a gender problem. If by patriarchy you mean the existence of social roles for men and women that influence the choices they make, it seems completely obvious that the patriarchy exists. But it doesn't seem obvious why you would call it a patriarchy. It seems to me that the word patriarchy very strongly implies a group of men who are controlling all of society for the benefit of men. And you yourself talk so much about the power of words and the sort of connotations that words can have. It seems like it would be much better to just say there are these social roles for men and women and we think lots of them are harmful and we should fix them, rather than talking about a patriarchy that oppresses women as the sort of one way that this kind of things will work. So I'm wondering why you think the concept of patriarchy is useful.
Tom Campbell, Grey College. So the first speaker for the proposition sort of argued from this idea that liberal feminism of the second wave, that is feminism to change the law, has succeeded. And that the problem now is that we have this idea of social oppression that doesn't really exist. Well, for starters, second-wave feminism was extremely concerned with social oppression. It's in the founding documents of the WLM, the Women's Liberation Movement. So that has always been a part of feminism. Secondly, the idea that feminism is only now becoming middle class. It's always been the case that that's a problem within the movement. So it's not lost its way in that sense. It's always had that issue. And there is social oppression of women, and we can see it in everything that happens publicly. For example, if you look at some of the criticism that is often levelled to Theresa May, it's often that she spends too much on her clothes, whereas you would never, ever hear that about a male politician. And if you... No, I won't have your point of order, actually. And if you think of... Hillary Clinton as well. If you think of Hillary Clinton as well, you have another example of how gender was so used to attack a woman in public positions. So the idea that A, feminism has never had these problems before is wrong, and B, that the idea that social oppression isn't a real thing that doesn't need to be addressed is also wrong.
There was something quite interesting you said at the beginning, though this rant isn't particularly targeted at you, that you were the only female speaking at that dinner, and yet you say that we don't need to bring biology into it. To me, that's an absolute contradiction. And as the proposition was saying, it's as though you're automatically taking this defeatist position that just because you're the only woman there, you're automatically at a disadvantage. I mean, a little anecdote for you. The other day I was at an assessment centre and I walked into the room. There were seven candidates there. They were all male. I was the 8th candidate and I was the female. I think the typical feminist would have stood there and said to the recruiters, well, why aren't there more women? Where are the quotas? Rather than doing that, I strode right towards every candidate, shook their hand and confidently went through the assessment day. I got a call to say they were very impressed and I was the top performing candidate that day. The point is, this defeated position puts you at a disadvantage. By taking away the feminist label, you go on to higher things. You have to treat men as people, not as oppressors. You listen to what they have to say, you work with them, you take them seriously, and they'll take you seriously back. And it's important that we do accept that feminism has indeed lost its way.
Artem Nestorov, Houston College. I study economics, and my question is to Vicky. It wasn't clear from your speech whether you theoretically accept the existence of delta in pay gap. So you spoke about the pay gap and gap in economical power that's probably synonyms. However, do you accept the existence of any delta in a pay gap? I'm saying that it could be another way, probably in a fair world, that we are fighting to get, and maybe men should be paid less, but then this delta, should there exist any, should be justified by extensive social sciences that are huge data and should be cleared of the factors like maternity, paternity, and choice of jobs and whatever. But in the end, do you accept the existence of such a delta, or do you want exact equality in a pay gap? That's the question.
Mark Wong, Grey College. I've got a really simple question, but that just puzzled me, and I thought, if for the same work a woman earns less than a man earns, why don't companies just hire women to save money?
So I'm Summations as a campus society, and I'm presently the first speaker of the proposition. So I had many issues with your speech, although a lot were addressed by the second speaker of the opposition. So I'll keep it down to 3 very quickly. So the first was that both of you hark back to the age of the 60s and go as far back as 1792 and say that feminism during these time periods was on its true path, was truly relevant, it was truly effective. But you then saying that it was only truly on its path when it was catering to the goals of white middle class women. So yeah, and neglecting the goals of ethnic minority women who were also facing gender discrimination. That's my first point. My second point is that so you deal with the concept of part-time pay and how if you work less hours you're entitled to less pay. However, we must first question why the majority of women are in part-time jobs in the first place. And this is because there is a social perception that is imposed upon them that it is their duty to stay at home as opposed to men, to raise the children, to perform the household chores, and therefore they only have enough time for part-time jobs. That's my second point. And my last one is, you spoke about the myth of rejectification and how it's not truly an issue that needs to be dealt with. I'm sorry, but when all of my female friends go out to the clubs in Durham and are groped, catcalled, and when they reject these catcalls, verbally abused and instantly being called fat bitch. I'm sorry, but this objectification plays into this culture of groping, of objectifying women, and it's something that needs to be stopped. Thank you.
I think feminism is quite a decisive term, as we've seen tonight, we just can't really agree on what it really means. Should the term be abandoned altogether if it's lost its way?
Ollie Brown, Grey College. If feminism is truly about gender equality, then why should feminism dictate what is a good or an immoral role model for girls?
Mark Lennon, Grey College. My question is for Ms. Grant. You stated in your opening remarks that you proudly describe yourself as a feminist, but also that you applaud the 82% of women who do not describe themselves as feminists. Why is it an issue of substance for you, but a PR issue for everyone else? Oh, thank you.
I have so many questions, but I'm just going to stick with one. For the opposition. I think you talked about airlines, and that's something that's of particular interest to me. I do agree with your points that there hasn't, particularly within the last decade, been enough advertisement towards encouraging women into the aviation industry. If you look at the posters that have been put out by companies like EasyJet, BA, they're exceptionally targeted towards men, and this obviously does not allow for equality of opportunity. However, if you look at the current scenario, where a lot of the companies are offering huge scholarships to female pilots, ignoring many of the male candidates who are there, and forcing them to go abroad as far as Indonesia to go and be employed. We've seen issues with EasyJet and such companies who pursued this policy of equality of outcome, where their pass rates have actually gone down and suffered as a result. So do you think that we should push for this equality of outcome as well as equality of opportunity, even if it means risking something as important as the aviation industry, where safety is of high concern?
Hi, my question is for Charlie Apple from Millwall College. My question is for Vicky or Madeline. I'm being a bit cheeky because that's a distasteful question, so please answer it. Help me out. My question is this: to what extent is a redefinition of masculine identity, similar to what happened during the second wave for femininity? To what extent is that redefinition essential for achieving equality? And secondly, is feminism the best way of achieving that redefinition?
I'm at Durham College. I've got a question for the proposition, particularly Dr Joanna Williams. So you said that feminism is now holding women back, but would you not say that it's actually it's become more like wide-reaching or far-reaching in the fact that now it's not just about equal pay, it's about looking at how children are raised and whether the toys that we give to girls like limit their sort of growth in the way they think. And we've seen the thing with Lewis Hamilton mocking his nephew for getting a dress for a present or something, and it was feminists who were arguing, like, let children be children, let them develop their confidence. And do you not think that actually feminism hasn't lost its way? It's actually doing a lot better than just promoting feminism. It's promoting the liberation of men as well.
Touched on by the proposition, most people nowadays tend to prefer to identify themselves as egalitarian rather than feminist. Don't you believe that this is partially due to the muddling of feminism's message, and that this clearly therefore shows that feminism has indeed lost its way? Can the opposition please share their thoughts on this? Thank you.
Mr. Price from St. Cuthbert's. This is a question for Dr. Williams. Your main criticism of the Me Too movement was that it was women victimizing themselves. But I would argue that in removing this label of victim, what other label are we supposed to take on then? Do we become complicit in our own sexual assault? So if we do take back this proper label and correct label, I would argue, of the victim, do we not then reclaim also our moral high ground in being able to, in future, say no, slap men as you suggested we do, and stand up for our own rights over our bodies?
As mentioned by the proposition about women being able to take jokes, and I think it kind of leads into the idea of how we're represented in media. It's not just one woman being able to take a joke, it's the constant repetition of one that's certainly turn into harmful stereotypes. I think that's more of the issue than just one offensive joke.
Roger Shelbrick Davis from Cuthbert Society. This evening we've heard feminism called a movement, we've heard feminism called a unified front, we've heard it called many things. Intersectionality was founded by not a white middle-class woman leading the European feminist movement, it was founded by a Mexican lady at a conference. who stood up and said, no, quite frankly, you do not represent me. You do not represent mi feminismo. The point of the evening, I think, and something that has perhaps been missed, is that there's this suggestion that feminism is a single coherent movement with singular coherent goals. It's not. I hate to break it to you, but there are women around the world who would call themselves feminists. There are women around the world who are currently fighting against FGM. They are feminists in the exact same way the women who stood up in Me Too to fight against the scandal of Weinstein are. But for some reason, we're still hearing the same feminism has lost its way. Has branches of feminism lost their way? Perhaps. But can we say that the movement as a whole is now delegitimised because of that?
David Van Eggen, Van Muller College. So we've heard a bit about the grid girls and feminist general dislike for them and their desire to see them put out of jobs in order to meet this feminist end goal of equality. I think a very good example of how feminism has lost its way and just how backwards and bizarre intersectional feminism has become is the case of transgender athletes in sports. So you go beyond just putting working class women out of jobs and depriving them of the economic empowerment that you apparently want for them, but then you end up putting them up against men who are, well, people who are born as men who, in many cases, are about twice their size in physical confrontations. Is that not the perfect example of just how backwards and lost feminism is? That it's now actively endangering women's safety in order to meet this pursuit of equality.
Do throw your hands up. Roll, if you could just give 2 more cards, they can come to the ringing room as well. We'll now move on to closing statements. I'll ask Dr Joanna Williams to please close the case for his proposition.
Comments. I'm not possibly going to be able to answer all of them or do justice to everything that people have raised within 5 minutes, so I would really appreciate do come up and have a chat with me at the end, and I'll answer all your questions in detail then. I want to make 5 very, very quick points in 5 minutes. First of all, on the Me Too, and if women are not presenting them as victims, are they just complicit in their own suffering, in their own sexual assault? No. Time magazine, you'll be familiar with the American Time magazine, end of 2017, just 6 weeks ago, it labelled the Silence Breakers as the person of the year. So it had these celebrity women who'd spoken out against Harvey Weinstein, looking incredibly glamorous in the black dresses on the front cover of Time magazine. Now, what about all the women in 2017 who had made major breakthroughs in science, in technology, in the world of work, who had made medical breakthroughs, who performed operations? What we were asked by Time magazine was to put women on a pedestal for having suffered and for having endured. The women who had made major breakthroughs, who had done things, the women who had actually done things were not on the front cover of Time magazine. We're told the woman as victim is the paradigm of modern day womanhood. Okay, second point, toys and jokes, to lump those 2 things together. Well, I'm really sorry, but whatever toys women are being, whatever toys girls are being given, whatever jokes women over here, well, it's obviously not holding us back, is it? If they were really having such a huge impact, we wouldn't be going to university, we wouldn't be having this success at school, entering the labour market. So, big deal. I couldn't care less about the jokes people tell. If it starts holding women back, great, then I will worry about it. It's clearly not. Pay gap. We can get into all kinds of complex economic arguments about how we measure the gender pay gap and whether it exists or not and how big or how small it is. However it is measured, and you'll have to take my word for this or read my book, however it is measured, the pay gap is absolutely the smallest it has ever been on historical record. Now, we could say that's still a problem. Having a small pay gap is a problem. Okay, let's say this is a problem and we want to solve this problem. I have 4 suggestions to make of how we could solve the problem of the gender pay gap tomorrow. Number 1, tell women what jobs to do. Tell women what subjects to study at university. Tell them not to bother with gender studies. Tell them not to bother with English, history, sociology. Tell them they must do physics, they must do economics, they must do I don't know, whatever, computer science, you know, women must do these jobs. Tell them they do not get to choose. They must do these subjects. They must go into these particular careers, number one. Number two, tell women that when they have babies, they must only take a very short period of maternity leave and they cannot return part-time. They must go back to full-time work. Tell women that. Number three, cut men's wages. Well, we've seen this at the BBC. BBC men having their wages cut. Great, let's see more of that. Let's see how that helps families. Number four, increase the wages for women. Well, this is happening at some universities. Women professors at the University of Essex, all of them, £5,000 pay rise. All women professors, £5,000 a year pay rise. If anybody offered me, and believe me, I can plead poverty, but if anybody offered me a £5,000 pay rise because of my genitals, I would be so offended and disgusted. I would say, yes, give me a £5,000 pay rise. Give me that pay rise because I am talented and I'm good at what I do, not because of what I've got between my legs. So yes, we could end the gender pay gap tomorrow, but who would want to live in a world like that? Two other very, very quick points. Firstly, feminism today, it is snobby. It is elitist. And I'll tell you one very easy way to measure this. Let's do a survey, a very quantitative, scientific survey. Let's measure column inches. How many column inches, newspaper column inches, were given over to Kate Maltby's knee? How many column inches were given over to the girls in Rochester, Oxford and Newcastle who were groomed and raped? Right? And I can tell you, because I have looked at this, that far more column inches were given over to one woman, Kate Maltby, and her knee that may or may not have been touched 10 years ago than were given over to working class girls in care in Oxford, Rochester and Newcastle. That is scandalous. We can celebrate, we can put women out of jobs. We've talked about working as grid girls, as Formula One, grid girls and girls at dart matches, etc., etc. And yet, at the same time, I would like to know how many of these feminists who are happy and celebrating women being put out of those jobs actually employ a woman in their own home to clean their toilets. And yet it's okay, it's not at all demeaning to employ a woman and pay her £8 an hour to come into your home and clean your toilets. That's not demeaning, that's legitimate, that's perfectly acceptable, that's morally good for your health to go and be earning £8 an hour cleaning people's toilets. Yet to put on a pair of high heel shoes and a glamorous dress and earn £150 an hour, that is somehow immoral, that is somehow demeaning. How dare they say that? Finally, the point on gender here I think is excellent. The more feminism tells us it wants to move beyond gender, the more it succeeds in just one thing, which is more rigidly entrenching gender. It asks us to judge ourselves constantly in every situation we come across in life according to our gender. It's backwards, it's degrading, it's holding women back. We need to reject it, we need to move on.
Please close the case for the opposition.
I find this argument around gender quite disheartening. I use the phrase political, social and economical gender equality. I do not say equality of the sexes because that is binary and horrible. It's not fair to exclude people, and this is what we are going to do if we lose feminism. It is not I or any feminist who is stopping us. It is society that is stopping us, okay? Feminism is a wave, okay? And I mentioned that in my speech. It's a wave of equality and we're moving on. I do not identify as a second wave feminist. I identify as a feminist who's progressive and wants to move on. I understand that people will look back at me and go, we needed to be progressive, okay? We need to be more progressive then. But the thing is, we're constantly moving as history goes on. And I think your question was, Lucy, your question was about patriarchy. No. You questioned about how it's endangering women, or about the use of the words that I was saying that females, and I was trying to put myself in a demoralising position and trying to act defeatist. I wasn't using that as defeatist, okay? I was just simply trying to say that I was female. It was a fact, and I didn't want to sound defeatist. I wanted to sound and show you that this is the way that it is, okay? This is the way that we have been structured, that I am the only female talking. And it's a shame. And I really dislike this argument towards intersectionality. I really dislike it because, quite frankly, I am white, okay? And I am female and I'm straight, okay? And that is a privilege. That is a privilege. And I want to make sure and ensure for generations to come that I'm embracing diversity, okay? I don't want to stand here and allow, hark back to old suffrage movements, okay? Because that was great that happened, okay? But we need to progress, and this is what intersectionality is all about. It's not regressive. It shows a progression. It shows that no matter who you are, you can stand up and you can be accepted within a community. It is inclusive. And these words about, talking about how, words like patriarchy is just harking back and it doesn't exist, and what do I mean by using patriarchy? I mean using patriarchy. I use patriarchy because that's how it was. Okay, I study classics. I study how it was in the past, and it is actually very scary how similar it is to the past that we still live in. Okay, we still live almost in the past in these archaic forms. I've written essays, for crying out loud, which look at the past, and I look at how women are treated, and I think, oh my God, I'm glad that didn't happen. And it happens the next day. It's ridiculous that this is still happening. And intersectionality is part of the way, and it's part of the way forward. And I hope that everyone follows it. And thank you for listening.